हेलो एंड नमस्ते, मेरा नाम है डॉक्टर दीपानेता और आपका स्वागत है श्रीराम्स आईएएस के यूट्यूब चैनल पे। PSIR टॉक्स को बढ़ाते हुए हम एपिसोड नंबर 2 में इंडियाज नेबरहुड पॉलिसी पे बात करेंगे। देखा जाए तो लास्ट कुछ महीनों में कई सारे नए चैलेंजेस आ चुके हैं इस पर्टिकुलर पॉलिसी में, चाहे वो ऑपरेशन सिंदूर हो या अवामी लीग के अगेंस्ट प्रोटेस्ट हो बांग्लादेश में, या मालदीव्स और नेपाल की गहरी दोस्ती विद चाइना, या आप देखो श्रीलंका का कोऑपरेशन विद इंडिया। कई सारे डेवलपमेंट्स हो रही हैं और हमें इन सारे डेवलपमेंट्स, चाहे वो कॉन्फ्लिक्ट्स हो या कोऑपरेशन हो, सभी को एक नाप तोल के देखना चाहिए टू अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट इज द करंट स्टेटस ऑफ इंडियाज नेबरहुड फर्स्ट पॉलिसी। तो इसीलिए हमने कई स्टूडेंट से क्वेश्चंस मंगवाए थे कि उनको क्या डाउट है, उनको क्या पूछना है अबाउट इंडियाज नेबरहुड फर्स्ट पॉलिसी। उनको कोलेट करके आज मैं और इंद्रनील PSIR मेंटर बात करने वाले हैं उन पर्टिकुलर क्वेश्चंस पे। लेट्स स्टार्ट। इंद्रनील
मैम, हम लोगों को जो स्टूडेंट्स की तरफ से मेन क्वेश्चन आया, दे वांट टू अंडरस्टैंड व्हाट इज द बेसिक क्रक्स ऑफ नेबरहुड फर्स्ट पॉलिसी। तो उसमें क्या क्या पैराडाइम है इंडिया के पास?
So if you take a look at what is policy, policy is basically a set of guidelines, set of principles based on which the government takes any kind of decision or any kind of initiatives. अगर देखा जाए नेबरहुड फर्स्ट पॉलिसी का एवोल्यूशन तो स्टार्ट होता है पंचशील से, उसके बाद गुजराल डॉक्ट्रिन। तो उसके साथ साथ जो भी हमने डिसीजंस लिए हैं या स्टेटमेंट्स लिए हैं, ये सारे इन्हीं प्रिंसिपल्स के बेसिस पे है। एंड फाइनली 2014 में वी हैव द नेबरहुड फर्स्ट पॉलिसी कमिंग इन, जो फाइनली लास्ट ईयर जाके इट हैज बीन रिटन इन डिटेल एग्जैक्टली कौन से प्रिंसिपल्स के बेसिस पे है। तो आज के दिन हमारे कौन से प्रिंसिपल्स इंपॉर्टेंट है? वी हैव शांति विच इज पीस, सहयोग विच इज कोऑपरेशन, वी ऑल्सो हैव संवाद विच इज dialogue, we also have samriddhi which is prosperity, and finally we can talk about sanskriti and other kind of linkages that we can have with other neighbor countries.
C. Raja Mohan, it's a question from me only. C. Raja Mohan highlights that a country to be a regional power should have dominance in the region at first, right? Like USA, it has in the North America continent, USA is the primary player out there. So how can we say, okay, after implementing the neighborhood first policy, has India arrived to that stage where India can call itself a dominant player in South Asia?
So I think that's a very realistic prism through which a policy is being seen. And India doesn't make policies based on realism or this zero-sum game. It is largely seen, or when we make policies, it is a direction or a signaling to the neighbors that this is what we are going to follow when we talk about relations with them. I don't think we really have that kind of an aspiration to be the dominant in the South Asian region or to be the hegemon, regional hegemon. It is more of an indication that we are willing to build, we are willing to create a South Asia which is peaceful and focused more on economic prosperity.
This question is from Jatin. He is asking, despite extending billions in lines of credit and being the first responder in crisis, has India been able to convert its goodwill into strategic influence?
That's a good question, because when we do power, we always talk about hard and soft power, right? And we talk about the fact that in hard power, which is basically influencing the other through threat, right? Which is again use of military and other kinds of force. That is through which you are influencing the decisions of the other, which is made in your favor. For example, threatening Afghanistan that if you don't do what we want you to do, we are going to then, send some military or some sanctions on you, like Iran के साथ अभी हो रहा है। Exactly वही चीज होता है hard power. Now, hard power will give you immediate results. Hard power will give you immediate strategic influence. On the other hand, soft power takes its own time. What is soft power? Using basically influencing the other through a very softer means of use of culture, civilization, traditions, customs. So India uses soft power through yoga. It uses soft power through HADR, that's humanitarian and disaster relief. It uses soft power through the economic means.
Bollywood.
It uses Bollywood. It uses medical tourism. So we have a lot of things that we use in soft power. Now, when it comes to soft power, the return, that is the strategic influence or the strategic imperative that you're talking about, it takes time to build. And it is not always a one-way street. It requires the partner country to also slowly develop its trust and friendship with India. It's a game of patience, it's a game of resilience, and that is what India has always focused on. And we have got some good results. Take Africa, take Sri Lanka in our neighborhood, right? There was a time when Sri Lanka was cozying up with China. Hambantota was a result of that.
Yes.
Right? And we kept on saying ki mat karo, but wo hua. And finally, yeah, China did what it had to do during the COVID, and India was right there helping Sri Lanka. Similarly, right now, we are telling Bangladesh that don't take the billions of dollars for the Teesta Canal project, but Bangladesh thinks it is their strategic autonomy to take that. But it is also obvious that they are going to go into a debt trap, and in future, they are going to have trouble returning that debt.
So we can see a pattern that India का बात नहीं माना जा रहा है, China से दोस्ती किया जा रहा है, and eventually India is coming to rescue. So in this backdrop, can we say that the Chinese leverage in South Asia is increasing over time? China is able to manipulate India's neighbors, like Nepal, right? And Bhutan has also started talks with Beijing in recent times. So can we say that in South Asian region, in India's neighborhood first policy, China will, in coming days, China will play as a major determinant?
Of course it would. It was always a major determinant. But the problem out here is, so let's put this again, break it into parts. China always was interested in entering into the South Asian region. And the neighboring countries, except for Bangladesh, they always had a problem with India's big brother image. Right? The narrative was always very anti-India in the initial years.
SARC was initially started with that outlook, right?
Yeah.
With India joined later on.
Which India joined later on, was given actually by Bangladesh. But then the problem again arises is that there were so many checks and balances, so many areas that they just did not want to open up their market. So even though we have a SAFTA, doesn't work.
It doesn't.
Right. So you can talk about SAR, you can talk about any kind of cooperation, BBIN, Bhutan worked out. So the problem here is lack of trust. Now, when it is lack of trust, it always gives that leeway for others to come in, and China exploited that. And China has been steadily exploiting it. What could India have done? So India, we are not a country with deep pockets. We cannot keep giving loans after loans, which China can. So we could not play the economic game. Instead, we tried to play the soft power game, which was through influence of, again, civilization, customs. But that was seen as interference. Again, kind of had a wrong turn in relations. And today what we see, let it be Bangladesh, let it be Nepal, let it be Bhutan, they're all in talks with China, right? But of course, they also realize that the kind of loans that they have taken, for example, the Pokhran International Airport, the kind of percentage that they have taken, it is way above the market rate. So it will be very difficult for them to get the money back. And that's why they are again, anti-India, because they want Indian planes to fly out of Pokhran, which India has refused. We want to continue with Kathmandu, and Nepal feels that this is how India is sabotaging their plan.
Okay.
So this is the small things that China is exploiting, and China is giving more loans. Right now, China is interested to create a railway network, Tibet and Nepal, right? The Trans-Himalaya network. That's what it's working on. And China has always been exploited.
But a lot of Chinese projects has been questioned on the grounds that it's not economically viable, right?
Even Pokhran International Airport wasn't. What is so special about that international airport? Why would a landlocked country, a small landlocked country, need two international airports? What kind of flight, rush were we talking about, traffic were we talking about? And especially the landing at Pokhran is not easy. So why was that the entire loan debt was required is in the first place a question. So China has always been funding these projects. Let's talk about the Teesta. The Teesta Canal project that China is funding. Tell me, is it an economically viable project? You are basically funding linkages of canals in which agriculture will increase. Now, agriculture will never give you the return to pay back a debt.
True.
You need to have a port, you need to have something in which trade can come in, FDI can come in, some kind of money flow will happen. Agriculture, really, how will you pay back that loan is the question.
So let us go to the second dimension. Okay. Sejal has asked this question: how crucial is maritime security in the Indian Ocean for India's neighborhood policy vis-a-vis China's string of pearls strategy?
Okay, that's a very, again, a good question, but I have a problem with the string of pearls policy. And Indranil, let me introduce you to my understanding of string of pearls. Because string of pearls came up in, the early 2000s, and this concept was, the word string of pearls was actually in the media first. Right? When this entire linkages were done of the ports and the Hambantota port happened, then you have, Gwadar coming in. Djibouti, though, of course, was there. But the line that was beautifully drawn from Djibouti to Gwadar to Hambantota to Chittagong to Kyopkyo, the entire beautiful string of pearls, when you draw it in the map, you see that it is encircling India. But let's look at the timeline. India was definitely rising at that point of time, but India was not a threat to China. The immediate threat was China's perception that there could be a blockade at Malacca Strait, which is the Malacca dilemma. So it wanted an alternative route, which was why you have CPEC and CMEC coming up into 2013. Right? The BRI project coming in, the CPEC, CMEC coming in. So you have to see the string of pearls as China's, thought process to ensure its trade routes. It's, of course, the main agenda is that you should not hit China's Achilles heel, which is what? Trade. If China's trade gets affected, China is bust. It is never a game of, that zero-sum game is not military out here. It is actually trade. And that is the reason why it wanted those hubs to ensure that trade routes. Now, again, when it was drawn, everybody said, it's encircling India. So India started having this string of diamonds or diamond necklace coming in, which was where India started having ports, which were, again, sometimes on loan, sometimes as, part of a treaty in which we could use that port. So Oman's port, the Duqm port, is basically on usage basis. Other ports also that we have usage, or we have Chabar ka tender hai hamare paas. So basically ye sari cheezein se we have certain ports. Again, media started saying that diamond necklace, but we have to understand that India is also talking about two major things. Trade. The entire Sagar policy is security and growth of all in the region. Growth is what? Trade. Security. The word security is not against China or America. It is against the HADR, which is the piracy, which is against any kind of disaster that happens, cyclones or anything. So the entire focus of Sagar policy, which is India's maritime policy, is HADR, humanitarian and disaster relief, along with prosperity. Again, there is no China mention. I think we should really avoid this prism of China.
And think South Asia as an independent growth engine.
Yes, why always put India versus China everywhere? India's having its own trajectory, China's having its own trajectory. We compete somewhere, we have convergences somewhere.
So India should rather focus on convergences with its neighbors along with China?
I think yes, and that is what we are doing currently. So when people are saying that there are so many challenges, India's neighborhood first policy is in a crisis, it has actually failed because of all neighbors going against us. I think our current government is working on the convergences. So look at how we are talking with China on the border. We are also engaging with other parties, other countries, including Bangladesh. We are again wait and watch policy, but we still are talking.
We are still talking.
Right? So that is our approach with every neighbor, whether it is Maldives, whether it's Sri Lanka, we are focusing on convergences. If Maldives had really hurt us so much, then our Prime Minister would not have been visiting it. Right? Focusing on convergences. That is the thing to do right now.
So the government of India, a few years back, launched Project Mausam.
Yeah.
Right.
And UPSC asked a question on that.
Yes. So the ideal goal of that project was to build the cultural linkages that we have. While India has been putting a lot of effort, right, claiming the Buddhist heritage, we have also seen China actually playing on that Buddhist cultural link and their Confucius Institute spreading across the world. So what is your take on that? How India should, invest more heavily in its soft power and cultural diplomacy in coming times?
That's again, Indraneil, sitting in India, we really think that we are a soft power. We are kind of competing with China, and what is, the dilemma about it. But tell me, if you look at the news of Middle East, apart from the economic aspect of India, the GCC or the West Asia and China relations, where do you see soft power of China playing out in West Asia, or let's say in Africa? It's the economic thing that dominates.
That is dominating right now.
From the perspective of India, I can tell you that in the Hebrew University in Israel, as well as the Riyadh University, the King University there. Apart from that, there are so many universities where Hindi is taught. So there's a lot of focus on the India superpower. And look at the number of countries joining in the International Yoga Day. Africa,
International Solar Alliance has also been.
So I think India's soft power game is really top notch when it comes to West Asia and Africa. We are picking up in Pacific Island. But as I said, soft power is largely ignored by the realists, right? They want to see hard power, they want to see economic gain. But we have been making a lot of inroads there. And now we started leveraging a diaspora. So I think we are on a much better footing when it comes to soft power vis-a-vis China, at least in these regions.
So a lot many geopolitical flux is going on in the region, right? We have been having issues with Pakistan after the Pahalgam attack. Bangladesh has seen a coup d'etat in recent times, right? So how India should, if India wants to take a leadership role of South Asia, how India should approach its neighbors? Institution building will be a way ahead in the form of BIMSTEC, or should it remain bilateral like we have been doing up till now?
A mix of both. But I think what we should focus on is strategic autonomy of all our neighbors. And that is again something that we are already doing. Regardless of what is happening in Bangladesh, look at the statements we have released. One of the statements that we released was about the Hindu minority, and the other one was that we are in support of the democratic process in Bangladesh. So we have not made any other statement regarding what is happening there, the electoral process. It's there. The entire mess is there to handle. Right? Instead, look at what the caretaker prime minister or leader is now talking about. He went and said, that Northeast, we can always come closer, and all of those absurd statements. I don't even want to repeat them. Absurd statements, which were provocative to India, but we didn't respond. So we have been maintaining that strategic autonomy that, it's your internal dispute, you manage it. But when it comes to the region, it would be better if we focus on economic prosperity rather than these minor disputes. Exception being, of course, Pakistan. And even with Pakistan, our road ahead is very clear. I don't understand why Western media and other people are confused about it, because our government has been very clear about it, that we are ready to engage with Pakistan when they stop state-sponsored terrorism. That's the red line.
That's the deal breaker.
Yeah. So when we are so clear about it, why is there a discussion that, will India start resume trade or this? We have been very clear about it. And I don't think with terrorist attacks continuing to happen, we are going to change our stand on it anytime soon. With this in mind, except for Pakistan, with other countries, we have that, idea that you do yours, we do ours, but when it comes to bilateral or regional, we focus on economic prosperity.
Yeah. Another thing that I'd like to say, ma'am, over time, India used to have a big brother approach, right? In almost 20th century, second half of 20th century, we could see that India tried to dominate in every aspect. But now over time, India has learned to exercise its strategic patience, the strategic restraint. Okay, fine. If something is happening in Bangladesh, then it is their mess to take care of. India will only intervene if Indian interests are hurt, right? So that is, in that way, we can see a reflection of Indian version of realism in India's neighborhood first policy also, right?
Correct. I think we are now thinking beyond a region. Our engagement, look at the visits that we are having, our engagement is with the global south. And that is where, whether it is the, the idea of Vishwaguru or Vishwamitra or the Viksit Bharat, it is in line of having multiple trade partners and having outreach programs with multiple countries, whether Latin America, whether Pacific Island countries. That's where our focus is. So I think, again, the perspective is changing, and it is changing towards focusing towards coming together on convergences.
From idealism to realism.
Absolutely. But I think even in realism, we are moving towards a realism that suits our
version of realism, not the Western.
No, not the Western. We are not, we are really not following the Western prism of realism, wherein it's hardcore, hard power, or, things like that. We do have our own understanding of realism. I think what we can see is a classic representation of Kautilya's Mandal Siddhant.
So now I'll present you the last question of this session. Sai Mithun has asked, looking ahead to the next decade, what should be India's top 3 strategic priorities in South Asia?
Strategic priorities. First is to have our borders sorted. So this is something that our External Affairs Minister as well as the Defense Minister has been talking about, that we really need to now focus on the borders. We did that in 2015 with Bangladesh. We need to get it done with China. And once we have that sorted, there will be at least relative peace in the region. The second thing is to focus or revive the SAFTA back, right? Of course, with Pakistan, that will be a problem, but at least look at having a BIMSTEC kind of a SAFTA possible. Focus more on economic terms. Third is maritime. We cannot ignore maritime anymore. So, we would really need to step up on our maritime engagements, especially in Bay of Bengal. Why? Because in Bay of Bengal, you suddenly have too many joint military exercises between China, Russia, and Bangladesh. And we really need to step up on that. So again, maritime is the third important thing that I can think of. Now, before we end, Indranil, I have a question for you regarding India's neighborhood policy from the perspective of an exam, right? From the mains perspective. Now, if I have to evaluate it, what would be the, let's say, the convergences and divergences in a general way of all countries in the region? So let's say 3 convergences and 3 divergences of every country in this region. And again, coming in the line of making India's neighborhood first policy a success.
The first thing is that, as World Bank has rightly pointed out, the region as a whole, given its participation in global trade, the inter-regional trade is abysmally low.
Yes.
Right. So we can work on that.
It's actually 4% compared to 25% of ASEAN.
Yeah. It's abysmally low. There is no trade linkages. So what we can do is, like, as you have suggested, we can check Pakistan out of SAFTA, and the rest of the countries can club together. Maybe we can complement each other in strength, right? Okay, fine, the entire jute industry or the textile industry of Eastern India could be revived along with the Bangladeshi labor force, right? We can focus on tourism collectively. If we are able to connect the Nepals and Bhutan along with the our tourist circuits that we have, like the Buddhist circuit,
the Ramayana circuit,
right? We can also link with Nepal and Bhutan and Sri Lanka as well, right? So we can work on that. Other than that, Shashi Tharoor has rightly pointed out that India has got the potential to deliver digital public goods at very cheap rates for developing countries. So we can leverage on that. We can exchange that with these countries. Okay, fine, we have got our India stack ready, almost ready. We're still working on it. We have got our Jam Trinity. We have got our digital DigiLocker, right, for our digital identities and all. So that way we can help our neighbors. So along with that, there will be education, healthcare,
the
right?
soft power,
all this entire soft power thing. because that is the development deficit is what we can address primarily as India, because we do not have the capital like China to invest, right? But we can give the soft solutions like tele-education, digital
Capacity
healthcare,
building.
capacity building. We can totally work on that. Divergence is what I believe is the strong divergence that India has in with its neighbor is the intervention and the interest of global powers in the region, right? China is not the only threat that we have here. US is involved in this region from Diego Garcia, right? France is there
Reunion
from
Island.
Reunion Islands, right? Britain is there, right? Few days back, their F-35 jet landed in
Kerala, yeah.
Kerala, right? That caused
Just did not, it just refused to leave, right?
it refused to leave. So some conspiracy theories say that it was there to gather information about Indian radar defense systems.
I would believe that we gather a lot more. we gather a lot more information. I'm sure our intelligence figured out what is going on inside.
So we can do that. And another thing that Europe has taught about regionalism, that we can give an umbrella protection to all our neighbors. Right? If we can converge in a Europe-style supranationalism, perhaps, but everything minus
Pakistan. Too far-fetched.
Too far-fetched. But that would actually save a lot of capital from all these nations who are all equally poverty affected. Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, Nepal, India itself.
But again, I would have a problem with this idea. Why? Because we are developing. Developing countries are very anxious about their security. EU, a developed area, will not have.
Yeah. We also have our insecurity dilemmas also.
Yes. So the divergences would be that we cannot come together because we are all developing and we have our insecurities actually coming in. We cannot, at least on security parameters, we cannot collaborate.
So it was a far-fetched thought of mine because it would save up a lot of capital to invest in human capacity building, which is actual need of the entire region. Moreover, there is climate where we should cooperate, because global warming and the depleting glaciers, the hydro diplomacy and everything coming in the picture, it's going to be a very difficult phase for South Asia in particular in the coming region. Okay. So we need to collaborate. Hydropowers is a good method of engagement with Bhutan and Nepal, right? Bhutan is pretty successful model where we have employed hydropower diplomacy, but Nepal has been a failure, right? Because of trust issues that we have. So maybe we can find a common ground there.
Right. So, I think, the divergences are here to stay, but the way forward is to engage with all multiple stakeholders and keep engaging rather than just giving up hope. I think we have to keep engaging and focus more on convergences. I think that is the way forward for any policy, not just in India's neighborhood first policy, but any policy would be that. Okay, with this, let me wrap up today's discussion. I hope you also enjoyed and I hope this was informative for you all. If you have any questions, please feel free to write it in the comments or send it to us and we'll revert back with another episode. Till then, bye.